Welcome. I'm glad everybody's here. We got a nice crowd. I appreciate it. It's Aegis 360 Consulting, one of our pop-up webinars. Always free, always on the web. We have our own YouTube channel. You can find it right on YouTube at Aegis 360. And they're always archived there, and you can share them or go back and watch them again. If you would do us a favor and subscribe to it, you'll get a little update when we've posted something new. And we get a little help for the fact that we've got more subscribers. So we're going to get right to it with delegation. And if you have any questions, please jump right into the chat room and I'll do my best to get to you. And of course, we'll stay on a little bit later and talk if you need to talk. So, there's a couple of things that I find that managers struggle with at a really mighty way. And delegation is very possibly one of the biggest. That and being able to give a coherent presentation. I find that probably the presentations are more split. Some people are just kind of okay in front of a group, and other people, they say, I'd rather be in the box than giving the eulogy at a funeral. That's how terrified they are of speaking. And it's something you have to learn, but delegating is one that I find really is a real problem. And there's a lot of different reasons for it. I've spent an enormous amount of time trying to help people be better at delegating. And I'm going to give you kind of the short course on it. We do a lot longer in the live workshops, but I'm going to kind of get you at least a good starting point. And if you want to sort this out later or you're really struggling with it, give me a call. I'll be glad to talk to you. I'm always willing to help somebody to be better. It's interesting when it comes to delegating, there's been a lot of work done on this. And there's a great case study that Harvard put out. If you subscribe to the Harvard Business Journal case studies and so on, you can find it. I believe it's called "Are You the Bottleneck to the Organization?" But basically what it boils down to, reading between the lines, is what we find is that the stunt in growth of either an organization or a department is oftentimes around the inability of the leader of that department or of the company, if it's the whole company, to delegate tasks out. And a lot of times I hear a lot of reasons why we don't delegate. I call them lame excuses. I also find out, Ned, I don't know what to delegate. I don't know what to get rid of. Can you help me figure that out? Absolutely. And we're going to jump into that. So let's first understand one of the big reasons people don't delegate. And they will tell me that it's time. I don't have the time. And I go, what do you mean you don't have the time? Just hand it over to them. No, I don't have the time yet. It's going to take me longer to actually show them how to do it than just doing it myself. And it just takes, and I can get it done in I can get it done in 20 minutes, and it's going to take me an hour to do it. And I don't have the time. And I hear this continually. And what I will tell you is a lame excuse. And we're going to work through all four of these. There's a lot more, but these are the ones that I hear the most. These four that I'm about to share with you. But they claim that they don't have the time to actually delegate. And I will tell you, you don't have the time not to delegate. So that's number one. I hear this one a lot. I can do it better than they can. I'm better at it. It'll get done better. You know the old saying, Ned, if you want a job done right, you got to do it yourself, right? And we're going to talk about that one as well. I hear it continually. That it's going to take, they won't do it as well as I do it. And then it's not to my level of proficiency. So therefore, I don't want to give it away and let anybody else do it. So we're going to talk certainly about that one. I hear this one a lot. They might do it better than I do. I'll sit down at the poker table with them and they'll actually beat me at it. And I don't want them to do it better than me. Now, usually people will veil this. They won't be quite this honest about it. Although with a lot of clients, people have finally said, what if they do it better than I do? Well, how's that going to make me look? I finally get somebody to tell me the truth. And we'll talk about that. They might do it better than you. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then last but not least, people are control freaks. And they've got to manage everything. They've got to be 100% in charge of it, and so on and so forth. And what I will tell you, it's a huge issue, the control freak part. I got a question in the chat box. How does trust play a part in delegating issue? It plays a huge part in it. It really does. And here's where it plays. There's two different types of trust. I could almost do, and maybe I should do a whole nother webinar just on trust, but there's two different types of trusts. And without getting too deep into it, there's what we call predictability trust, and then there's vulnerability trust. Predictability trust is the trust that I put in someone else based upon their behaviors. So they control that trust. I know for a fact that, I trust the fact that when my kids are done eating, they'll automatically wash the dishes and put them in the dishwasher, right? They won't just leave them on the counter. Or I know for a fact, I see that kid heading out there with the cereal bowl, and I know I'm going to walk out in the kitchen. I know where I'm going to find him. I'm going to find it right on the kitchen counter, because I don't trust my kid to put it in the dishwasher. And the kid owns 100% of that trust, because the kid can change the behavior, which will then change my predictability trust, the trust I have in what someone else does. Vulnerability trust, on the other hand, is a trust I have in myself. And Tom, this probably plays a little bit more into the delegation piece, frankly. A little bit of the predictability side if I'm talking about a very specific individual. But oftentimes, at least with both a control freak, and they might do it better than I do, the vulnerability piece of letting something go and have somebody kind of show you up, it actually can play a piece in it. And let me, the best way to describe vulnerability trust to you is this way. If I have high vulnerability trust, I will be pretty much an open book. I'm not very good at this. I need help with that. I'm sorry I didn't do such a good job there. This scares me. I'm concerned about this. That's high vulnerability trust. In other words, I'm kind of an open book. I'll leave myself open. And what plays into that is I decide that I'm going to share something confidential with you, and you break that trust by telling someone else. Here's what's interesting. You moved the predictability trust that I have in you pretty significantly, because now I don't trust you to keep a secret, but you didn't move the vulnerability trust. In other words, I'll be open with the next person, right? If I don't have a lot of vulnerability trust and I don't share things easily with others, the fact that you kept that trust, let's reverse it, and I finally share something with you, a fear that I have, let's say, or I share with you something I'm not very good at and I'm a little ashamed of it. I don't want people to know. And you keep that confidence. Well, the predictability trust in you goes up, but you didn't change my vulnerability trust. I won't all of a sudden start sharing that with a lot of people. And so the vulnerability trust is the one I hold in here. If I have a fear you're going to outshow me, that's probably a vulnerability trust piece. That has a lot more to do internally than externally. And the same could be held on the trust factor. That's actually a very good question. Thank you. So these are the 4 lame excuses that we're going to talk about, and kind of break these down. And then I'm going to give you a model. It's not really a model. It's a tool to help you kind of figure out what it is that you should even delegate. So let's go down that road. We're going to talk about the time factor first. And I kind of stolen this from the McDonald's little mathematical theory that McDonald's, when they make an improvement, and this is true for all continuous improvement in any kind of whether it's a service or manufacturing or whatever it happens to be, what you need to look at is, when you think about these kinds of improvements, is you look at it in a very small scale and you make minor improvements that measure up to big improvements. So when McDonald's tears down a restaurant and rebuilds it, and they go into the back and they rebuild the kitchen, there's a lot of things you don't see happening back there. And they may have come up with a way to make the fries 4 seconds faster and hold the quality and so on and so forth. And to McDonald's, that's a big deal. And you go, it's 4 seconds. You spent a lot of effort on 4 seconds. It's not the 4 seconds they care about. What do they care about? Times 1 million fries a year, or at least in that kitchen, times 1,000 fries in an hour. And they can now increase capacity and satisfy their customers. So they understand that. So we're going to kind of want you to kind of go from that basis. Let's say that the task that you're considering delegating takes 30 minutes to do. Okay, it's a 30-minute task. And let's say that I don't have the excuse is, oh, Ned, I don't have time. It takes me longer to teach it than to actually do it. In fact, Ned, it's going to take me 60 minutes to teach somebody how to do it. And clearly the math, as everybody on this call has already made the math, you say that's a loss of 30 minutes. So therefore, I'm not going to teach it. You know what, though, is the most dangerous thing about what I have in front of you? It's 100% accurate. That's why it's so dangerous. The problem is you've left out a very critical piece. How many times a year do you do the task? This is the part that McDonald's adds into this. And any of us that do anything with a continuous improvement mindset of any kind. And by the way, delegation, as far as I'm concerned, it's a management issue. It's also a continuous improvement issue because it makes us all more efficient. So it really lives in both worlds. Lives there quite a lot. But if you do it 10 times a year, that's 300 minutes a year you spend on the task. And you're now saving 270 minutes. And if you want to understand where that breaks down, it's a half a day a year you've just saved yourself. So you can do this on the back of a napkin. You don't need a software plan. You don't need an Excel spreadsheet. You might not even need the calculator on your phone. You can sit there after work having your beer or whatever, or sit there at breakfast with your coffee and think about this and just scribble this out on the back of an envelope and say, wow, I could pick up a half a day a year. And you go, well, a half a day is not a big deal. Well, depends how many half days you pick up. You know, there's a famous quote that's been attributed to I don't know how many different politicians. And it doesn't matter who said it actually, but one of them said, 1 million here, 1 million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money, right? You know, and we get that into that kind of a mindset with our time, you know, well, it's only a few minutes here, it's only a few minutes there, but pretty soon you're talking about real time. And so I want you to think about this and think about the time it takes to delegate something out. And I want you to put a different mathematical formula into it. And I want you to do the first maybe 3 steps, but then I want you to do this last step, which is how many times a year do I do that? Right now, there's another component to this that we really are going to talk about a little bit later in this, but that's the development of the employee. And as far as I'm concerned, that has value to your time. It has a lot of value to your time. So I want you to kind of think about that as well, and we'll kind of bounce back on that. So now let's kind of move to the next one, which is I can do it better than they can do it. And let's just assume this is a some sort of a task that you've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, and you're going to teach it to a brand new person. And you say, oh, I'm not going to teach it to them, or I'm not going to delegate it to them because I can do it better than they can. Well, here's my answer to that. I hope so. I sincerely hope so. I had this lesson brought home. It's interesting sometimes if you open your ears up to different people in different settings, how much they'll teach you. And I was working with a large manufacturing company several years ago, and I happened to end up working for working with the different management, the department leaders. And I was getting a tour of each department through this entire manufacturing facility. And the weld shop manager, this guy had, come out of school and he'd been a welder his whole life, and he'd graduated up, if you will, or brought up to be in charge of the entire weld shop. And he had, I don't know, a dozen or so welders working for him. And I do some hobby welding at home, and I took shop, and I kind of like it. I think it's fun. It's a neat little thing. And I make gifts every once in a while for folks. So I'm asking him some questions about welding, and he's answering. And I said, how you're a pretty good welder. You've been at it. He says, yeah, but these guys are better than I am. And I said, really? I said, how long have you been welding? He said, virtually my whole life, Ned. I'm going to retire in a couple of years. He goes, I've been welding my whole life. And I said, well, these are some young kids. And he says, yeah, but they're welding every day. And he said, and I teach them, and I give them a new challenge. And he said, I've got a little test weld station over here, and I'll dream up a challenge, and I'll have them spend a little time working through my challenge. And I made a little competition out of it. He said, I don't pick up the stick anymore. And For those of you who don't know anything about welding, there's a stick that comes out of a handle and they weld with a stick. He goes, I don't pick up welding sticks anymore, Ned. He goes, oh, I weld at home and I'll do a little bit here and there. He goes, I'm busy managing. He goes, if they don't do it better than I do, we're all in trouble. And I was like, wow, what a great lesson, right? So I hope you do it better than they do it. Now, here's the thing I want you to think about. At some point, this was handed to you for the very first time. And somebody that handed it to you did it better than you did it. And they gave it to you anyway. And you got better over time. In other words, they gave you the opportunity to improve, to learn, to be of more value to the organization. Why are you holding that back from somebody else? Simply because you can do it better than they can. Yep, you're right. You know what? At some point, you finally looked at your child and said, you have got to figure out how to tie your own shoes. I've taught you, I've showed you, I've helped you. Now you're going to sit there and you're going to figure it out. Because why? Because I want you to be self-sufficient and I don't want you having somebody else tie your shoes for you your whole life. And we finally push people to do and learn new things. So I'm going to tell you right now, you got to get over this. This is not an acceptable excuse for me. If you're my client and you say, I do it better than they do it, I'm going to go, wrong answer. Wrong answer. They've got to learn how to do it. This is where I come back to say, even if on my time calculation, it's even time, maybe not a loss, maybe not a gain, there's a piece of this that I need to be thinking about. My time is well spent developing somebody else to do a job and giving them the bandwidth to make it better and to do their job and to learn how to do new things and help them grow their career, whether it's sideways or up. So this is a non-starter for me, this one right here. This is another one I like. They might sit down and beat me at the poker table, right? They might do it better than I do it. And here's my answer to that. With any luck, I hope they do it better than you do it. I really do. I hope they do it a lot better than you do it. You know, there's anybody who's a real teacher always says there's nothing better than to be beaten by your students, right? My sister's a professional equestrian trainer and has been teaching people to ride forever. And she taught my daughter to ride. And I'll never forget, my daughter was in her mid-teens somewhere and we went to a horse show and they both entered into the same class on two different horses. And my daughter got a blue and my sister got a red. And my sister was delighted. She said, when the student beats you, it means you've really done a great job. Right? And that's the lesson I want you to think about. When you delegate somebody to someone else and they end up doing it better than you do, you should be doing backflips down Main Street. This is a huge success piece for you. This is exactly what needs to happen. For those of you that are control freaks, and this one is interesting. I'll get people to admit this one quicker than the last one. They'll say, I'm a control freak, I can't give it up, right? So if you're a control freak, you're probably not going to like what I'm about to say. Oh, get over yourself. You're not that good at whatever you do. You're good, but you're not that good. Somebody's always going to be better. Just for crying out loud, let it go. Not only that, but we're really talking about something completely different. And I want you to think about this in another way. And this covers all four of these and any others you might come up with. You know, as a manager, as an individual contributor, I have responsibility over my paycheck times one, right? So if I make $50,000 a year, I got to make sure I give the company $50,000 a year worth of value. Actually, it should be better than that. If I have one person to work for me and they make $40,000 a year, I'm now responsible for $90,000 worth a year of value to the company. And the math goes on. And if you're doing everything and they're not doing anything because you're a control freak, that's not looking very good. Here's one other thing I want you to think about. If you're doing their job, what job are you doing? And if you're not asking that question, I can promise you your employees are. All right, so let's move on to the why. Why do we delegate? Well, we delegate to grow the employee. I think I just talked about that a little bit. And that's one reason we should delegate. I want the employee to learn something. We Um, we delegate so we can teach the employee something. They can learn something new. Really, really important. We also delegate so we can have better connection within the organization and we can be more efficient. We can get a ton of stuff done. We can increase all of our bandwidths and all of our processes, and we can grow. Because how do you think Costco does it? If the CEO did everything, you wouldn't be able to get anything anywhere. You have to delegate. If you don't do it, you're never going to grow. And then last but not least, and I think this is really, really important, one of the other big things is I actually want a different look. I want a different lens to see this. I want the diversity. We talk about diversity, let's practice it, not just in the type of people and who we have, but you know what, is you give a job to someone with a different mindset and a different vision and a different lens they're looking at the world through, they're going to come back with a whole different way of doing things. And they might come back with you and say, well, I don't know why we even do this anymore. I've been doing it now for a month. I don't see any value in doing it. Maybe we get rid of it altogether. Maybe we delegate it to the trash can. It's great when we can do that. Here's one other reason that you should be doing it for yourselves. You need to get out of the weeds and be able to look at things from a whole new perspective. And as long as you're down there working in the business, you have no opportunity to work on the business. As long as you're working in your job, you have no opportunity to work on your job. And this is really huge. So you've got to start giving these things away. So the next thing is people say, Ned, I don't know what to delegate. Okay, fine. I've gotten rid of the time excuse and the other three that you gave me. Help me figure out what I get rid of. I'm not even sure. My boss gave this stuff to me. Don't I have to do it? Well, I've got a neat little tool. And again, you can do this on the back of an envelope. I basically take the tasks and put them into three distinct buckets or columns, if you will. So the first one is the things that you have to do. Now, how do I know that don't I have to do it all? Actually, you don't. And that's the beautiful thing about this. So this is what this looks like. You have to do something is if under license or certificate through some governmental body or some other group, you have a license or certificate and says you will do this. So one of the ones that comes to mind right off the bat is a professional engineer that puts their stamp of approval on some blueprints that are going to go build a bridge or a building. Well, guess what? Only the professional engineer can put their stamp on it. So the professional engineer is the one that has to approve that and put their stamp on it. So that is by license or certificate. They can't delegate that out to, I don't know, the accountant. The accountant's going to go, yeah, I don't even know what I'm looking at here, right? So they don't have that opportunity to delegate that off. They have to do that. That is by license or certificate. And that can be a governmental license or certificate, or it could be, non-governmental, but still within some sort of regulatory body, whether it be internal or external, doesn't matter. It could involve some proprietary information, and we can't share that information. Let's say that you're on a small committee and you're out doing acquisitions for your company. Well, there's a lot of things that are proprietary there, confidential. You can't share it. You're under non-disclosure agreements. There's a lot going on, and you can't delegate out some of that to maybe an assistant. So you kind of have to do that yourself. There could be some of those sorts of agreements that have been made. Maybe this task has been given to you by your boss, and your boss says, Ned, you're going to do this. I want your thumbprint on it. I want you to personally handle this. All right. I've got my marching orders from my boss. The boss said, I'm going to do it, and therefore I'm going to do it. Now, a lot of people say, Ned, isn't that true with everything your boss gives you? Actually, it's not. If you're a manager, your boss expects you to delegate and run your shop. So this is one that I would probably have a conversation with my boss and say, when you want me doing it personally, make sure you tell me. And if it's okay to delegate, I'll assume everything else is. I mean, that's just kind of an understanding you ought to have. And then last but not least, it could be confidential in nature, maybe not proprietary from an external legal agreement, but it could be confidential. It could be an HR situation. You've got an employee and you've got a problem, or they've got an issue, and it's just confidential in nature. It's not proprietary information under a legal sense, but it is confidential and just wouldn't be prudent or even if it would be legal, it would be unprofessional for you to share that by delegating some piece of that out. So you wouldn't do that. Payroll would be a great example of that, right? That would be confidential in nature. So it doesn't always have to be a discipline problem. It might be something else. Now, let's talk about the things you have to do part of. Maybe the report you have to sign. Okay, you have to sign it. You have to certify that everything in the report's good, but you didn't have to go out and get every number. You could have delegated that out for someone else to get those numbers and bring them back in, right? So you could delegate part of that. Warranty decisions, you make the final decision, but somebody else actually gathers the data and brings it to you. You might only do part of that function. Now let's talk about the have to, or the don't have to do, and that basically, frankly, is everything else. If it doesn't fit into column 1 on the left, column 2 in the middle, I guarantee you where it goes. It goes right here. Calling customers, making copies, all these sorts of things. So now where are we going to look to delegate things? Well, the column on the right and the column in the middle is the first place I'm going to go look. Now, look, I'm not saying you have to delegate all of those things, but if you say to me, "Ned, I don't even know where to look," I'm going to have you do this exercise, and then I'm going to come back and say, pardon me, let's talk about the things in those 2 columns, and let's have that conversation, and let's figure out how to make that work, and go forward from there. All right. Well, I want to thank you. We've gone just a little bit over. This is a deep topic. I could probably do a couple of hours on this at least. Again, if you need to contact me, you got any questions, you're certainly welcome to reach out by phone or by email is fine. You can jump over to our YouTube channel and see this again, or share this with somebody if you like. Everything is over there is for you to use, and I appreciate it, and good to see everyone. Thanks. I'll hang on here. If there's anybody that wants to talk or ask a question, you're certainly welcome to ask it. So I'll stay on for just a little bit.